So we're back, continuing with environmental problem solving strategies. Now, the first thing we need to do with any environmental problem or any problem at all in a general sense is that you need to understand the nature of the problem. So from an environmental perspective, the first step towards making a sound environmental policy, so policies, as we mentioned, would be those guidelines that are needed to help solve a particular environmental problem. But the first step towards that means that we have to address the issues and the disputes that are involved in it. We have to fully understand it. So you cannot solve a problem if you do not fully understand the nature of the problem. And this is particularly important because environmental issues have so many different stakeholders, so many different parties are involved, and the issues can be very complex. Each group and persons of interest who can be affected by the environmental problem, each person will have their own concerns, their own priorities, and sometimes these concerns and priorities do not complement each other. So that can add to the complexity of the issue. So this often leaves people pursuing options which do not really advance their interests. They just really want to deal with the immediate problem, and oftentimes the long-term problems are not really in sight. So this brings us to the need for environmental dispute resolution. How do we go about it? We need to identify affected stakeholders, all those varying groups that can be affected. We need to bring them into the policy making process because, as mentioned before, remember the environmental issues and concerns are very complex. So if you develop policies without the input of those various stakeholders, you're going to develop policies that are very narrow in its approach, that does not take very important issues and other important issues into consideration. Therefore, you're not really solving anything. You also need to identify the different issues that need to be addressed. So you identify the different stakeholders and their issues. Number 3, the parties to environmental dispute also need to employ an effective communication technique so that they can accurately understand the positions, actions, and motivations of the other parties. Right? So this is a very general approach because no matter what the issue is, there are different stakeholders involved. They will have disputes and disagreements over different things. So how do we communicate? That communication is very important in order to come to some kind of agreement as to how you move forward. That is in the form of the policies. Okay, so effective communication needs to be addressed. Number 4, crucial to the success of efforts to successfully negotiate a compromise solution of the environmental problem is an understanding of when the situation is ripe for a settlement and when it is not. So this is where you often find that you need professional mediators or parties who have an expertise in negotiating, mediation, and consensus building, bringing the different groups into a level of agreement. So oftentimes you have to reach out to third-party individuals and third-party organizations in order to provide this type of expertise, because the stakeholders involved, because of their different personal interests and different personal agendas, they can tend to get emotional about certain things. And when you have to solve problems, getting emotional can actually get in the way of making sensible decisions. So third-party expertise in communication and mediation is often needed. Okay, so now we're looking at building environmental arguments. What do we mean by that? Another strategy. It is important to have an ability to persuade others that a problem does in fact exist and that the proposed solution is appropriate. So sometimes people can choose not to want to face facts, or to face what is really going on, and there could be many reasons for that. Each of us, we have our own personal filters on, and those filters are designed by personal experiences, cultural experiences, etc. We refer to that as a worldview. All right, so how do we overcome um, unproductive worldviews? Again, communication, but not only communication. As part of that, you would want also to provide facts and data. All right, so you don't want to just go to somebody and tell them, this is bad and this is what we have to do. You need to provide some kind of supporting evidence as part of building your arguments. So this in turn requires an ability to make the moral arguments as well. So we're not only talking about supporting data, we're talking about being able to make a moral argument why this is not right, why is this good, and as opposed to that not being good, etc. So these moral arguments concerning the appropriate relationship between human society and the natural environment. All right, so that is also very important. Additionally, in terms of problem solving, there is the perspective of administrative procedures now. So most environmental policy disputes are not resolved by agreement-based processes. All right, the environmental problem solvers need to understand the many other mechanisms through which environmental policies are made. So it's not a straightforward thing, a group of people just come together, agree about something, and develop a policy. That's what we're saying, right? It's much more than that. One such mechanism is administrative procedure, in which government officials make many key environmental decisions. So what we have to recognize here is that no matter what wonderful policies we come up with, remember those policies have to be implemented, and it has to be implemented at the highest levels of government. So what you need to do as well is you also need to get buy-in and support at the highest levels of government, politicians, government officials, etc. So, and how do you do that? You have to educate them, because remember, many of these people in those high administrative positions don't necessarily understand environmental issues. So there's a need to educate them and make them aware of the issue, so that you can get buy-in, not only to finance some of the policy making, but also to push for the implementation of laws and the enforcement of these policies, etc. Additionally, as mentioned before, litigation could also be another strategy. So if you already have environmental laws in place, you find that some environmental policy disputes are resolved through litigation or the threat of litigation. In other words, take them to court. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have um, the Environmental Management Commission, where you can take your complaints to the commission for resolution. So that's like a similar to an environmental court. Then we also have civil cases that can be brought in certain instances based on the EMA Act. For example, things like laws like the noise pollution laws, water pollution laws, etc. Right? So those things, through those laws, can also be presented in the regular courts. Now, with regards to politics, there's also a political approach um, to problems and solving environmental problems. For example, either lobbying of existing legislative bodies, those would be your lawmakers, or get involved in electoral campaigns designed to change the membership of those bodies. So say, for example, you have an election going on and you have two parties, and one party clearly is not interested in the environment, and the other has an interest in the environment. Um, you can choose to support and promote the electoral campaigns of those that are in alignment with your environmental priorities. Okay. Additionally, um, appropriate tax money for environmental purposes. In other words, get access to tax money. Um, and of course, you do that by building that relationship and building awareness with the highest levels of government so that it can be included in their budget. All right. Determine how state and federal lands are administered, so you can at a political level or a state level, um, you can try through education and lobbying to try to influence those things, through policy as well, and also promoting the enactment or creation of laws which dictate private responsibilities on a broad range of environmental issues. So we're talking about, from a political level, gaining access to parts of the budget towards environmental purposes, having the administration of lands, state and, so that would be like for us local and central government lands, influence over how that is utilized and managed. So sustainably managing the land through, for example, land use zoning, etc. And of course, promoting the creation of new laws that defines the environmental responsibilities of various parties across the board. All right, so that's on a political level. And then there is the market approach to solving environmental problems. We have many environmental actions that result from market forces rather than government policies. So, for example, societal culture, what people believe or don't believe about the environment, economic affluence, rich countries or rich communities often tend to be less um, mindful about the government, particularly when it comes to our levels of consumption and the amount of waste that we produce. So culture and economic affluence can actually have a negative impact on the environment in terms of our behavior. All right. So the making and promoting of green products and services and the promotion of green events, green business, etc. So it's an environmental mindset now that needs to come in. So in order to change the direction of those market approaches. All right. And oftentimes you find that these are decisions that will really have to be made at the highest levels of government in order to force these changes um, into taking place, because the general societal mindset would not be in that area. Typically, the general societal mindset would be one of, immediate gratification without really thinking about the long-term consequences. All right. So at the administrative, I beg your pardon, at the highest levels of government, market approaches can be influenced through laws, education, etc. So as we talk about education, another strategy would be public education and the grassroots approach. So other important environmental actions result from individual decisions that people make governing their own behavior. For example, to choose to recycle or not, choose to carpool or not, conserve energy. You switch off the lights in your different rooms in your house when you're not in it. Don't run the air condition every day. These are choices that we make. But what would influence those choices? We have to persuade people to pursue more environmentally conscious lifestyles. And so this is a very important component of environmental problem solving. And how do we do that? As mentioned before, education from baby all the way up. Different strategies could be used. School education programs, public education programs through the use of the media. Various means can be used. Um, Additionally, not only public education, if we have to change the way the people behave, again, we would also have to pair that with other strategies such as legislation and enforcement of policies, etc. So sometimes we have to force behavior in a particular way, and sometimes that may mean um, putting laws in place and applying penalties where persons violate those penalties. An example of that may be the Littering Act, where if people are caught littering in public places, they can be fined according to the law. So I want to thank you for joining me for today's lesson. Please refer to eClassroom for the activity for this week. Thank you.